Some marks on the skin are ink. Others are memories clawing their way to be seen. What happens when the person you ignore turns out to be the person you needed to notice all along? Let us know in the comments section below. And don't forget to subscribe to follow stories that honor the quiet strength of our veterans. He didn't flinch when the brake lines hissed. Lawrence Jenkins had driven Bus Route 4 for so long that his body reacted before his mind did. Shift into park, tilt the mirror, eye the mirrors once more. Routine, smooth, silent, unchanging. It was 5:40 and his first pickup was still 2 minutes out. On base, time was sacred. In the civilian world, people ran late. But Lawrence still arrived 10 minutes early, every single day, because it was never just about driving. It was about control. He adjusted the collar of his gray uniform, faded but clean, and gave his reflection in the plexiglass partition a quick glance. The tattoo peeked out just below his left elbow. Faded navy ink, still razor-sharp in meaning. The trident. He hadn't covered it in years, not because he wanted to show it off. Quite the opposite. It was a test. If someone noticed, really noticed, they earned the right to ask. Most didn't. Behind him, the hiss of hydraulics triggered again as he opened the door. A middle-aged woman stepped up with earbuds in. Lawrence gave a single nod. She didn't look at him. No one ever did. He was the driver, part of the scenery. Unless he was late or the air conditioning failed. He liked it that way. Until the kid stepped on. Sharp haircut, clean-shaven, shoulders back, fresh boots with zero wear. The kind of presence you couldn't train for. It had to be bred into your blood. Lawrence didn't break routine, but his eyes flicked up as the recruit passed him. The kid paused, just briefly, then nodded. Not just out of courtesy, but out of recognition. Lawrence said nothing. Neither did the kid. But something shifted in the air between them. The next stop, and the next. Passengers came and went. The young man, who'd taken the first seat behind the driver's cage, didn't budge. Occasionally glanced out the window. But mostly, he was watching Lawrence. Subtle, but not subtle enough. Lawrence wasn't bothered, not really. He'd faced worse than curiosity. But what gnawed at him wasn't the stare. It was the silence behind it. He'd seen that look before. Recognition paired with restraint. The last time he saw it, he was dragging a rookie from the burning wreckage of an overturned Humvee, both of them spitting blood and sand somewhere outside Marja. He exhaled slowly. "You got a question, kid?" Lawrence asked finally, eyes still on the road, voice low, not unkind. There was a pause. Then the kid leaned forward slightly. "I do, sir," he said. Voice steady, no bravado. "Is that what I think it is on your arm?" Lawrence didn't answer. He signaled for the left turn at Wilson Avenue. The kid continued. "Try it. I've only ever seen one up close. My uncle had one, Team 3. He passed away in 9. Lawrence nodded once, nothing more. The silence returned, but heavier this time. Not awkward. Just waiting. "You prepping?" Lawrence finally asked. "Yes, sir, NSW prep. Heading to Great Lakes next week." Lawrence took the turn a little slower than usual. The kid's voice was too respectful to ignore. No ego, no posturing. Just that same burn he remembered feeling at 19. That fire in the gut that screamed, "Earn it," every time you blinked. "What's your name?" Ethan Colburn. That was it. Lawrence didn't need more. They rode in silence for another 5 blocks. Ethan didn't look away from the rearview mirror, eyes occasionally catching Lawrence's through it. There wasn't awe, just attentiveness, like he was trying to memorize a chapter that might never be written down again. "You ever drive a convoy through Helmand?" Ethan asked, quieter this time. Lawrence didn't answer immediately. He was staring at the stoplight as if it could somehow take him back a decade. "More than a few," he said at last. Ethan leaned back, nodding slightly. "Thought so." Lawrence turned his head just a hair. "You always talk this much?" Ethan smiled faintly. "Only when I think I've met someone who matters." The light turned green. Session. And Lawrence drove. Not much else was said. A few stops later, Ethan stood up and nodded as he exited. "Thank you, sir." Lawrence gave him the smallest of nods back. But the silence in the bus didn't return the way it used to. It left behind a hum. Something unfamiliar, like the residue of being seen. Not long after, 2 other recruits boarded. They didn't say anything, but Lawrence noticed the change. They nodded. A little more respectfully than usual. Sat quietly. Didn't blast music or talk loud. Word was already moving. He could feel it. The tattoo hadn't spoken, but someone had, and in the right ears that was enough. Lawrence kept driving. Same route, same roads. But something had changed. And deep down, he knew the quiet wouldn't last forever. 3 days passed. 3 days of silence that felt anything but quiet. Lawrence Jenkins pulled his bus up to the usual Bayside pickup zone at precisely 5:40. Same as always. Same hydraulic hiss. Same rumble of the engine underneath his feet. But it wasn't the same. He knew it wasn't, because Ethan Colburn was back. Second row this time. Not directly behind the driver's cage, like before. Still early, still squared away, still carrying that respectful tension only the freshly enlisted seemed to wear like an ironed uniform. But now, Ethan wasn't alone. 2 others climbed aboard behind him. One was built like a linebacker, heavy-set but solid, dark complexion, wide-set eyes, and a jaw that looked like it could chew through concrete. The other was leaner, light-haired, with a long, narrow face and the kind of cautious grin that told you he was the designated wisecracker of the trio. They nodded as they stepped on. Not to the bus, not to the road, not to the world. But Lawrence, the big one, said, "Morning, sir." No sarcasm, no irony. The skinny one added, "We heard this route's legendary." Lawrence didn't react much. He nodded, just once, and turned his eyes back to the windshield. But inside, he felt the weight of it, the kind of weight that only comes when something you buried starts clawing its way back toward the light. The bus started to move. The familiar curves of the base perimeter blurred past, chain-link fences, old barracks, the mess hall, the loading dock that hadn't changed since the Gulf War. He'd driven past these sights thousands of times. They never used to mean anything. Now every landmark felt like a breadcrumb. He caught glimpses of the trio behind him through the mirror. They weren't talking loud, but they weren't whispering either. There was a murmur, quiet admiration mixed with uncertainty, like kids in a museum trying not to touch the glass case of an artifact. One of them, the wisecracker, muttered something that made the other 2 smirk. Then Ethan hushed them, said something low and firm. Lawrence didn't need to hear it to know the tone. Respect the silence. At the next stop, more passengers boarded. A few civilians, a couple of local contractors, a woman in hospital scrubs. Nobody paid attention to the shift. No one noticed the 3 young men sitting straighter, acting just a little more composed than the other riders their age. But Lawrence noticed. He noticed everything. It wasn't long before the questions started. The tall, quiet one, his name tag read Johnson, waited until most of the bus had emptied at the halfway point. Then, carefully, from the 3rd row back, "Sir, is it true you were in Bud/S-Class 201? Lawrence didn't turn around. "Where'd you hear that?" "Rumor mill," Johnson replied. "From a guy who heard it from a guy in prep. They say your class made it through Hell Week with just 6 survivors." Lawrence let that hang in the air. Not a confirmation, not a denial. He tapped the brakes at the next crosswalk, let an old man and his dog shuffle by. When the light turned green, he pressed the pedal with a kind of deliberate control that betrayed decades of discipline. "You'll find," Lawrence said quietly, "that the rumor mill doesn't usually have clearance." The boys didn't laugh. They didn't need to. The tension snapped into respect so sharp you could feel it ripple through the vinyl seats. But there was another voice now, one Lawrence hadn't expected. It came from the back of the bus, a man in his late 30s with a weathered look, civilian clothes, but the posture was there, elbows close, back straight, eyes always moving. He stood and walked forward, steady on his feet even as the bus bounced over a pothole. "Know that tattoo?" the man said as he reached the front. Lawrence glanced at him. "A lot of people do?" "Yeah," the man replied, "but I earned mine." And with that he rolled up his sleeve. There it was, another trident, but fated differently. The angles of it told a story of an earlier era, maybe a different team, but the same war. A ghost from the same fire. Lawrence didn't smile, but something in his eyes shifted. Recognition, not of the man necessarily, but of the bond. "You active?" Lawrence asked. "Retired last fall," the man said. "Bradley Myers, Team 1. I heard about you when I was still in. They say you walked away clean." Lawrence looked at the road ahead. "Nobody walks away clean." Bradley nodded once and sat in the sideways seat by the front door, close but not crowding. "Didn't mean to stir the pot," he added after a moment. "Just didn't think I'd ride a city bus and meet a damn legend." "I'm not a legend," Lawrence replied. "I'm a driver." The door hissed open at the next stop. People boarded, people exited, life went on. But something had shifted again. Now, there were 4 men on that bus who carried the same shadow. 3 barely stepping into it. 1 who knew how long it stretched. Bradley stayed up front, and for the next several minutes he and Lawrence didn't talk. They didn't need to. A silence between SEALs carried more weight than 1,000 conversations. At the final stop near the naval depot, Ethan stood as the others filed out. He paused by Lawrence's seat. "I hope you know what this means to us," Ethan said, "you being here." Lawrence didn't look up. "I'm just making sure you all get where you're going." Ethan smiled faintly. "You already have, sir." Then he stepped off. Bradley followed. Before he left, he placed a small folded note on the edge of the driver's console. Darlow didn't say anything else. Just a nod. Then the bus was empty again. Lawrence exhaled. Not tired, not burdened, but changed. He opened the note after a long moment. It read, "If you ever want to talk, not as SEALs, not as drivers, just as men, I'm buying the coffee. Myers." Lawrence tucked the note into his chest pocket without a word. And for the first time in a long while, when he pulled the bus back into the depot, he didn't feel like just a driver disappearing at the end of another forgettable shift. He felt like a ripple had been made. And deep down he suspected it wasn't finished. Not yet. Lawrence Jenkins had seen a lot of faces get on and off his bus. Tired faces, curious ones, sometimes angry, sometimes hungover. Most were forgettable, but not the man in the blue blazer. He stepped on at 6:10, 2 stops past the naval depot where civilians usually boarded for the hospital route or the docks. But this one wasn't just another contractor or supply chain manager. He had a presence. The kind that came from years of people standing when you entered a room. Silver hair, cropped close, posture perfect. No name tag, but the polished black leather shoes and pressed slacks. Lawrence made a quick mental note. Officer, high-ranking, probably Admiralty, but why the hell's he on a bus? The man gave a single nod as he dropped his fare into the machine, not even using the standard-issue government transit card. He chose to pay in exact change. Deliberate, almost. He took a seat halfway down, not drawing attention, but also not avoiding it. The other passengers noticed him, especially the younger ones in uniform. Tension crept into their shoulders like muscle memory. A few even adjusted their collars or caps. Ethan Colburn wasn't on that morning, but his 2 buddies, Johnson and the wise-cracking one Griggs, were. And they noticed immediately, whispered to each other under their breath. Lawrence didn't look back, but his senses sharpened. Years in hostile zones had made him feel when something was off, even if he couldn't see it. And this morning had that off feeling. Halfway through the route, Griggs stepped forward to get off early. He lingered at the front for just a second too long. "Big guy's Navy brass, right?" he asked, voice low. Lawrence didn't reply. Griggs waited, then gave a small shake of the head, more curious than annoyed, and stepped off. But the question echoed. Brass, on his bus. Lawrence wasn't stupid. He knew things didn't happen by coincidence, not in his world. Not when you had a past like his. It wasn't until the end of the shift that the man in the blazer approached. The bus was empty, engine idling at the depot. The officer stepped forward slowly, like a man with time, not like someone rushing to a meeting. "You're Jenkins," he said. Lawrence didn't answer. He simply looked at the man. "You served with Gold Team, Ramadi 6? It wasn't a question. Lawrence didn't confirm or deny. He just studied the man's face, now not to recognize him, but to measure his angle. What did he want? "I'm not here to put a spotlight on you," the officer said calmly. "Name's Rear Admiral Charles Duvall. I'm out of the Pentagon, but I don't do the paperwork anymore. These days I work on retention, morale, public integration." Lawrence's brow creased slightly. "This about PR?" Duvall chuckled faintly. "If it were, we wouldn't be having this conversation." He leaned lightly against the support rail, hands folded. "Thought I heard about your route," he continued. "Heard that since Colburn spotted your ink, more and more SEAL candidates have been getting on Bus 4. Lawrence said nothing. Duvall's eyes sharpened. "You've become something of a myth. They're calling you the Ghost." Lawrence turned toward the mirror, watching a janitor sweeping near the depot curb. "I didn't ask for that." "I know," Duvall said. "That's why it's working." The silence stretched. Finally, Lawrence broke it. "So, what's your angle?" Duvall straightened, slipping his hands into his coat pockets. "They want to build a training documentary. Realistic. Not the flashy recruitment stuff. Something for internal morale. Leadership stories, grit, quiet strength." Your name came up. Duvall blinked, surprised by the swiftness of it. "Just like that?" "You don't know what I've done," Lawrence said, voice low. "They don't need my face in some edited montage. They need to focus on their path, not mine." Duvall didn't argue. He just nodded. Slowly, "Well," he said after a beat, "I respect that, but it's not just the story. It's the impact. Those kids. Colburn, Johnson, Griggs. They don't just ride the bus now. They listen on that bus. They sit straighter. Show respect. You think that came from a documentary?" Lawrence didn't respond. Duvall sighed, then offered one last thing. "We're not asking you to teach, or film, or talk on camera. But maybe you consider stopping by the prep school sometime. Quietly. Watch a training. Maybe speak with the instructors, off the record." Lawrence's hands gripped the wheel. Duvall nodded once more and stepped off. "You ever change your mind," he added, "just let the right person know. They'll find me." Then he was gone. That evening, as Lawrence sat in his small kitchen with the lights off, he read the note again, the one Bradley Myers had left him. "If you ever want to talk, not as SEALs, not as drivers, just as men, I'm buying the coffee." He unfolded it again, even though he'd memorized it already. Down the hall, in a cedar box, were his service medals. A shadow box he hadn't touched in years, buried behind boxes of spare linens and tax documents. He stood. He walked down the hallway and opened it. The medals were still there, clean, untouched, as if waiting. He lifted the silver star out first, the one that never got mentioned in any article because no one in his team ever spoke of that day. They couldn't, not without revealing things that weren't supposed to be revealed. He held it for a moment, then set it on the counter. One by one he laid out the others. Bronze Star, Navy Commendation, his old unit pin. Then the trident, not the tattoo, the pin, the real one, the one he had driven into the wood of a bar stool in Bahrain when his teammate Danny was declared KI. He ran a finger over it. It still had the same dent from that night. By the end of the evening, the shadow box was empty, and Lawrence was staring at it like a man seeing a battlefield long after the smoke had cleared. He didn't decide anything, not yet, but he folded the note again, tighter this time, and slipped it into his wallet, just in case. The next morning, when Ethan Colburn got on the bus, he noticed something subtle had changed. Lawrence had placed a photograph behind the driver's cage, tucked into the side panel. He was old, sun-bleached. 6 men in camo. One of them, unmistakably younger, was Lauren. No caption, no frame, but Ethan knew what it meant. He didn't say anything, just sat in his seat, eyes forward, back straight. The legend didn't need to speak. He had already been heard. The first thing Lawrence Jenkins noticed that morning was the silence. Not the usual pre-dawn quiet, but a different kind. A kind you feel before you hear it, like a stillness waiting to be broken by something bigger than sound. His apartment felt too clean, too packed. 2 boxes by the door, one marked Keep, the other Drop. His retirement notice from the Transit Authority sat neatly folded on the countertop next to a sealed envelope from the city's Veterans Affairs office. His last day driving Route 4 had arrived. He didn't tell anyone. Not Ethan, not Bradley. Not even the supervisor who assumed Lawrence would probably die behind the wheel with a clipboard in hand. But Lawrence had made his decision 2 weeks earlier, after the visit from Rear Admiral Duvall, after unpacking the medals, after holding that long-ignored trident between his fingers. He realized something he hadn't before. Maybe he hadn't walked away clean, but he hadn't walked away broken either. And maybe that meant there was still one more thing left to do. So he kept driving for 2 more weeks, like always, showed up early, ran the route, nodded to familiar faces, ignored the rumors swirling among the recruits that the ghost was going to disappear again, maybe forever this time. The morning of his last shift, Lawrence drove the route like he always had. Right on time, unwavering, calm, until stop 7. That's when he noticed something was off. No one was waiting at the bench, which never happened at stop 7. It was one of the busiest on the route, usually a contractor or a group of medical staff. But this morning, empty. He blinked, slowed, coasted through. Stop 8, same thing. No Ethan, no Johnson, no Griggs. By the time he reached the halfway point of the route, his gut was tense, not with fear, but with the realization that something was about to shift. Then, as he turned onto Dyer Boulevard, it hit him. There was a line forming along the sidewalk. At first, he thought it was coincidence, a group of recruits doing PT maybe. But as the bus crept closer, Lawrence's eyes narrowed. They weren't moving. They were standing still, all of them, in uniform, standing in a line along the curb, not to board, not to flag him down, just standing at attention. He counted them as he passed. 15, 20, 30, all Navy, all young, all facing forward, arms behind their backs, chins up. And every single one of them saluted as he passed. Lawrence gripped the wheel tighter. The bus rolled slowly past the silent honor guard. His mirrors caught them turning their heads in sync, following him with their eyes. No words, no shouts, just the soft motion of raised hands and unwavering gazes. At the next stop, more were waiting. Another line, all saluting. By stop 12 there were flags, American, Navy. Even one handmade sign that read, "Real heroes don't need cameras, thank you, Mr. Jenkins." He didn't know who made it. Didn't need to. At stop 14 the bus finally filled, but this time no one spoke, not even Griggs. Ethan stepped forward to the front, eyes locked on Lawrence. He didn't smile. just handed him something small. A patch. Black and gold. Seal insignia stitched with the words "Earned quietly," worn proudly. Lawrence held it in his hand for a moment, then placed it gently on the dashboard. The words were exchanged. He drove the rest of the route with that patch resting next to his shift log. When they reached the final stop, Ethan and the others remained seated as the civilian stepped off. Then, slowly, they stood, turned toward Lawrence. Briggs cleared his throat, then glanced at Ethan, as if asking permission. Ethan gave a small nod. Drake stepped forward. "Sir," he said, voice lower than usual, "we took a vote. The guys from Prep, everyone who's ridden this bus the past month." Lawrence didn't respond, just waited. "We want to nominate you," Griggs continued, "for the Civilian Honor Medal through Naval Outreach." Lawrence raised an eyebrow. "I'm not a civilian," he said. Griggs smiled. "We know." He stepped off. So did Johnson, then Ethan, who paused at the front of the bus. "You told me once that you were just making sure we all got where we were going." Lawrence gave the smallest nod. "Well," Ethan said, voice steady, "we're going, and we'll carry what you gave us the whole damn way." He held out a closed fist. Lawrence looked at it, then extended his own. The two fists touched, a quiet, final salute. Then Ethan stepped off the bus. Lawrence sat alone at the wheel for a long time. He could have left then, driven back to the depot, turned in the keys. But instead he took the long way back. Not to delay the inevitable, but to enjoy, for once, the road he had traveled so many times. He turned off the main strip and passed the high school, where a junior ROTC class was outside doing drills. A girl noticed the bus and snapped to attention. Others followed. One raised his hand in a crisp salute. Lawrence didn't return it, but he did nod. Back at the depot, the supervisor was waiting. "Wasn't expecting you till noon," he said. Lawrence shrugged. "Done early," he said simply. The supervisor looked at him, then handed over a small manila envelope. "These came for you. Said urgent." Lawrence opened it. Inside, a certificate folded neatly, bearing the Navy seal. "Civilian Recognition Commendation for impact beyond the mission." He stared at it for a moment, then placed it back in the envelope. Didn't say a word. That night, as the sun dipped behind the city skyline, Lawrence stood outside the bus depot for the last time. No ceremony, no cameras, just him and the air. Bradley Myers pulled up in a silver pickup. "You still drink coffee?" he asked. Lawrence climbed in. The doors shut, and the city faded behind them. Some men live loud, some live large, and some, like Lawrence Jenkins, live in a way that leaves echoes, the kind that travel down sidewalks, across yellow bus lines, and deep into the hearts of the next generation, who one day might just find themselves saluting a quiet man behind the wheel, without even knowing why. But they'll feel it. They always do.